What's up, guys, and welcome back to my draft prospect rosters from 2003 to 2010, or 2000 to 2010. So in the last video, if you guys remember, it was like a month ago. We did Anaheim all the way up to Chicago. Basically, this series, what happens is I put all the players that have been drafted by that team on that team who still currently play. So if they're actually, like, say, not in NHL 17, then I don't put them on the team. But if they're in NHL 17, I put them on the team. So like I said, I did Anaheim to Chicago in the first episode. This episode, we're going to do Colorado all the way up to, let's say, the Rangers. And in the next episode, I'll do Ottawa to Winnipeg / Atlanta. And then we'll put it into a season simulation and see who's the best drafting team in like a season simulation kind of deal. So let's waste no time and get into Colorado's roster. So for Colorado, you got a very, very, very good center core, at least with the first three lines. You got Paul Stastny with David Jones and Brad Richardson. As you can see, the wingers are really weak though. Then on the second line, you got Matt Duchene with Chris Stewart and Michael Bournival. So once again, another really good center. And then you got Ryan O'Reilly with TJ Hensink and Mark Ulver. And then fourth line, you got Paul Carey, TJ Gagliardi, and Brandon Yip. Now defensively, you got a really good top two and a good third defenseman, but after that it drops off a lot. So you got Tyson Barrie and Kevin Shattenkirk. You got Johnny Boychuk and Tom Gilbert. And then you got John Michael Lyles and Cameron Gaunce. Goaltending wise, you got Calvin Pickard and Peter Budaj, so a very weak goaltending core. And then scratch players, you got Kyle Comiskey, Daryl Bootland, Jonas Holos, and Sammy Adekalio. So that is Colorado. Next on to Columbus, and Columbus is drafted very, very well in some positions. So as you can see with the first line, you got Rick Nash, Ryan Johansson, and Jacob Voracek. Then you got Cam Atkinson, who is a 6th round steal. I like to always bring that up because he's my favorite player. And then you got Derek Brassard, Jared Bull, Alexander Picard. This guy's actually a 1st round pick way back in 2004, 8th overall, but this guy has never really played in the NHL. Didn't turn out to be anything huge. And then Joachim Lindstrom, Matt Calvert, Derek Dorsett, Philip Dupuis. I think he's in the 1st round. He's a 4th round pick, but he is the brother of Pascal Dupuis, I believe. And then you got Peter Straka. Defensively, though, you got some good defensive players. You got Chris Russell and David Savard, John Moore and Mark Mathot, and then you got Dalton Prout and Adam McQuaid. So a solid defensive core, no like standout defensemen, but some good players at least. So goaltending wise, you got Steve Mason, who's probably the best goaltender Columbus has ever drafted, and Thomas Portpillay, who plays over in, I think it was in the Czech Republic. This guy never really played either because he was like a 5th round pick. And then scratch, you got Peter Pohl, Thomas Kubalik, Cody Goluboff, who plays in Colorado, Rostislav Klesla, Aaron Johnson, Trent Fogelhuber, and Ole Christian Tollefson. Now on to Dallas, and you have some really good wingers, but not very good centermen. So you got Jamie Benn alongside of Pertu Lindgren and James Neal. Pertu Lindgren was a 3rd round pick, but never really played in the NHL. I think he might have only played like a couple games, but he's their best center at a 76 overall. Second line, you got Louis Eriksson with David McIntyre, not Drew McIntyre, and UC Jokinen. Third line, you got Riley Smith with Joel Lundqvist and Alex Chiasson. And in the fourth line, Curtis McKenzie, Scott Glennie, who is probably the most recent biggest bust. He was an 8th overall pick as well in 2009, but he did not ever like really play a full season with Dallas. He's been more of a minor league player. I think he actually currently plays for Manitoba Moose. And then you also got Colton Sevier, I think it's Sevier. Defensively, you got some good defensemen again. You got Niskanen and Klingberg. Klingberg was another good steal in the 5th round in 2010. Then you got Trevor Daley, Nicholas Grossman, Philip Larson, and Patrick Nemeth. Goaltending wise, you got Mike Smith and Tobias Stefan, who's been like a Swiss goalie for his entire career. And scratched, you got a lot of players. There's one that's actually missing even. You got Alex Guptill, Richard Bachman, who plays for Vancouver, Thomas Vancouver, Luke Gazdick, Jack Campbell, who was another bust, 11th overall pick in 2010. You got Michael Neal, I think this is James Neal's brother. You got Rich Clune, Tom Waddell, Johan Franzen, not the actual Johan Franzen, but Johan Franzen. And then you got Steve Ott and Jarkko Immonen. I know Ott's retired now, but this is basically just who's in the game that I could put on them that's been drafted by them. So next on to Detroit. A lot of the teams that were good back in those days didn't have good draft picks, but Detroit, even though they were a good team during the early 2000s, they managed to draft pretty decent. So you got Thomas Tatar, Valtteri Filppula, and Gustav Nyquist, followed by Yuri Hudler, Riley Sheahan, and Sean Mathias. Then third line, Darren Helm, Landon Ferraro, and Justin Abdelkader. Then the fourth line, Johan Franzen, Corey Emerton, and Matthias Ritola. Emerton, I think, he was like a 2nd round pick, but he didn't turn out to be anything. He went over to Switzerland, I think, as well, or something like that, maybe Sweden. Then defensively, you got Nicholas Kronwall and Jonathan Eriksson, Brendan Smith and Kyle Quincy, Jakob Kindle and Nick Jensen. So really good 5 defensemen, well, at least good solid 5 defensemen. And then you add a 68 to that. That's not that good. And then goaltending wise, you got Jimmy Howard and Peter Mrazek, who both currently play for them still. And then scratch, you have some actually good players. You got Thomas Fleischman, Drew McIntyre, Timo Pulkkinen, Andre Nestersil, Mitch Callahan, Tom McCollum, and Kalle Järnkrok. Now on to the Edmonton Oilers, and they probably were one of the best teams to get draft picks as well, because Edmonton was really bad for multiple years after going to that Stanley Cup Finals. So you got Taylor Hall, obviously the 1st round pick in 2010. Then you got Sam Gagner, Jordan Eberle, Alex Hemsky, Riley Nash. Some people don't realize, but Riley Nash was a 1st round pick, but he's more of a bottom 6 kind of defensive player that currently plays for the Boston Bruins. You also got Andrew Cogliano, who was another 1st round pick. Magnus Payarvi, Kyle Brodziak, Jared Stoll, Zach Stortini, Chris Van de Velde, and Jean-François Jacques. Defensively, you got a really weak defensive core, actually. Brandon Davidson and Jeff Petrie, Matt Green, Taylor Chorney, Martin Berenson, and Josef Harabel. This guy was an 8th round pick back in 2003. Back when the drafts actually had more than 7 rounds. And in goaltending, you got a very good starter in Devin Dubnyk, but a really weak backup in Jeff Delorier. And then scratch, you got a lot of players that play overseas. You got Tony Rajala, Anton Lander, Curtis Hamilton, Callan Jones, Tyler Pitlick, Philip Cornet, Jussi Markkanen, Kalle Olsen, Dragan Umichevich. This guy was a 6th round pick in 2003 as well. Marc-Antoine Pouliot and Danny Sevret. So that is Edmonton. Now on to the Florida Panthers, who were pretty weak usually during those ones, but they didn't draft that good either. So you got Jonas Donskoy alongside of Bukestad and Frolik. Second line, you got Rostislav Oles, Greg Campbell, and David Booth. Oles, I think, was the 1st round pick. Yeah, he was a 7th overall pick, but he currently plays, I think, in Czech Republic. He never really turned out to be anything as well. Third line, you got Quentin Howden, Corbin Knight, and Connor Brickley. Fourth line, Tanner Glass, Drew Shore, and Garrett Wilson. Defensively, though, they've drafted pretty solid. You got Jay Bomeister and Dmitry Kulikov, Eric Goodbranson, and Alex Petrovic, and then Matt Barkowski and Keaton Ellerby. Goaltending, you got Jacob Markstrom, who was supposed to be a really good starting goaltender, but never turned out to be that kind of guy. He's trying to be that guy in Vancouver currently. And then you also got Brian Foster. Scratch, you got Wade Megan, Zach Hyman, who currently plays for Leafs, and most people don't realize he was actually drafted by the Panthers in the 5th round. Then you also got Joe Bazaraba, Lucas Krejcik, Tony Koivisto, Kamil Krebs, Thomas Malik, Peter Tadacek, Peter Kadlik, Colby Roback, and Michael Repik. So a bunch of Czech Republican guys. That's what I realized Florida draft a lot of is just Czech players. Now on to the LA Kings, and LA's drafted one of the best out of all the teams. Their lineup actually looks like it could be an NHL lineup. So you got Anze Kopitar, Wayne Simmons, and Tyler Toffoli. Second line looks really nice as well, except for the centerman could be a bit better. You got Mike Camilleri, Brian Boyle, and Braden Shen. Third line, Dustin Brown, Lyndon Vay, and Trevor Lewis. And then you got Dwight King, Nick Dowd, and Kyle Clifford. All those guys still play with the team. And then defensively, you got Alec Martinez and Drew Doughty, Derek Forbert, and Thomas Hickey, who was actually a really high up pick, but he's kind of a bust. He still plays for the Islanders, but 4th overall pick, and the guy doesn't put up more than like 20 points, I think, a season. I don't know. I haven't really followed him. And you got Kevin Gravel and Andrew Campbell. Goaltending wise, you got Jonathan Quick and Jonathan Bernier. Bernier is also a bit of a bust because he was an 11th overall pick, but he has not been the greatest in the last few seasons. But scratch, you got Yaroslav Bednar, Cristobal Huet, Lauri Tukinen, Konstantin Braun, David Steckel, Jeff Tambellini, Oscar Mulder. This guy was another 1st round pick, I think. No, 2nd round pick, but still another guy that was kind of a bust. Bud Holloway, Jeff Zadkoff, Jordan Wheel, David Cole Madison, and there's 6 more, but I'm not going to show you guys. Now into the Minnesota Wild, and Minnesota had a couple great picks. Marian Gaborik would have been way better during his earlier years, but he's an 82 overall in this. So you got Gaborik with Mikko Koivu and Benoit Pouliot, who is the biggest bust, I'd say, in history of, well, not history of busts, but at least in the last 10 years or so. Because basically Minnesota could have drafted either Carey Price or Benoit Pouliot, and they decided to go with Benoit Pouliot, and then Carey Price fell to the Canadiens. So just imagine if Minnesota would have drafted Carey Price, and then they would have somehow got Devin Dubnyk as well. You would have had 2 really, really good goaltenders, but Benoit Pouliot just never turned out to be anything. He ended up leaving for like Montreal, a bunch of other teams. He currently is with the Buffalo Sabres now. And he doesn't put up a lot of points, so he's kind of a big bust. Second line, you got Mikael Granlund, Eric Howla, who's now with Vegas, and Jason Zucker. Third line, Johan Larsson, James Shepard, who's a big bust as well. 9th overall pick, didn't turn out to be anything. And Ryan Jones. Fourth line, you got Colton Gillies, who's another bust actually. 16th overall pick. Kyle Wilson and Brent Bulmer. Defensively, you got actually Nick Leddy and Brent Burns. A lot of people also don't realize about Nick Leddy being drafted by Minnesota because he never played a single game with them, but he was traded to Chicago, or he signed with Chicago, where everybody knows where he was, and then he went to the Islanders. Then you got Marco Scandella and Nick Schultz, and then you actually don't have enough defensemen, so you got Cody Almond as a defenseman, and an actual defenseman in Justin Falk. And then goaltending wise, you got Darcy Kemper and Anton Khudobin, so a really weak goaltending core. Scratched, you got Danny Ehrman, Morton Madsen, Adam Krushaine, I don't even know how to pronounce that. You got Julian Walker, Julian Sprunger, Jerry Salinen, Chris Foucault, Matt Hackett, Eero Elo, way back in 2008 and 5th round pick, and Johan Gustafsson. Now onto the Montreal Canadiens, who have been good for many years. They had some really good prospects as well from their drafts, this one being Max Pacioretty. Then you also got Thomas Buchanan and Brendan Gallagher. Second line, you got the 2 Kostitsyn brothers, so you got Sergei and Andre, and then you also got Mikhail Grabovski, Third line, you got Matt D'Agostini, Kyle Chipchura, Ryan White. And fourth line, you got Danny Cristo, who was a second rounder as well as a bust. He's more of an AHL player as well. You got Maxime Laperriere and Chris Higgins. Defensively, though, this is where people don't realize as well. Ryan McDonough was actually a draft pick by Montreal. He was traded for, I think it was Pavel Valentenko way back in the day. I don't even know who that guy is now, but he was basically traded straight up for him. And Montreal lost out on a great defenseman, because just imagine if they would have kept Subban as well. You'd have had a very good top two defensive pairing. Then you also got Alexei Emelin and Mark Streit, who's now actually back in Montreal. And then you got Yannick Weber and Ron Hainsey. Goaltending-wise, you obviously got Carey Price, who, like I said, went right after Benoit Pouliot. And then you also got Yaroslav Halak. Scratched, you got Julius Nattinen, Morgan Ellis, Gabriel Dumont, Mark McMillan, Mac Bennett, Jared Tenorti, Andre DeVoe, Matthew Carl, Thomas Linhart, Nicholas Torp, and Matthew Aubin, who's a 59 overall player. On to our last couple teams. We got Nashville. Nashville is the best defensive team so far in this build. So first line, you got Craig Smith, Nick Spaulding, and Patrick Hornquist. As you can see, their center core is really weak. You got Colin Wilson with Cal O'Reilly and Alexander Radulov. And then you also got Matt Hendricks, Stanislav Balan, who was a 7th round pick in 2004. Scott Hartnell. You got fourth line, you got Scotty Upshaw, Yanni Lajunin, and Austin Watson. Defensively, though, this is where I'm saying they're the best defensive team. First defensive pairing, you got Ryan Suter and Shea Weber, 93 and 94. And then second defensive pairing, Roman Josi, 90 overall, with Ryan Ellison, 85. He should be actually better than in 85, in my opinion. And in the third defensive pairing, 285s again, Matthias Ekholm and recently retired Kevin Klein. Goaltending-wise, you got Pecorine and Jeremy Smith. And then scratched, you got Anthony Bitetto, 78 overall, Zach Budish, and Dan Haim. He was his even scratches in 85 overall. So as you can see, their defensive core is really deep. You also got Alexander Sulzer, Yanni Niskala, Timo Lasilla, Jordan Tutu, Daniel Whiting, Thomas Slovak, Brandon Segal, and Thomas Harant. Now onto the New Jersey Devils. And New Jersey hasn't drafted the greatest, considering during the 2000s they were actually one of the best teams a lot of the years. They won a Stanley Cup during the 2000s. They've made multiple finals appearances, so a lot of their picks were 30th overall or 25 plus, so they haven't really picked up anybody during those years. But first line, you got Parise and Henrique. Henrique was actually a steal, 3rd round pick. Then you also got Matt Halschuk. Second line, you got Barry Talixon with Travis Zajac and Timo Laine. I don't think he's any relation to Patrick Laine. Then you got Ilkka Pikkarainen, Jacob Josephson, and Thomas Pillman. And fourth line, you got Nicholas Bergfors, who was a 1st round pick, alongside Patrice Cormier and Mike Hofel. Defensively is better than the offense, I'd say. You got Paul Martin and John Merrill. And then you got Derek Englund and Eric Jelena, Mark Frazier, and Mark Fane. Goaltending-wise, you got Scott Wedgwood and Aryo Honan. I had to actually throw him in because they didn't have enough goaltending prospects from 2000 to 2010. So I had to put him in, even though he was drafted in 1999 as a 1st round pick. So that's why he is there, if you guys for some reason found that out. Then you also got Ville Salpinen, Peter Vrana, Pierre-Luc Letourneau-Leblanc, Mauro Jorg, Matt Corrente, Sean Zimmerman, Alexander Erbaum, Brandon Berlin, Seth Helgeson, and Joe Faust. Now on to the Islanders, and then we're actually going to end it with the Islanders. The Rangers, and to the end will be next episode. So the Islanders have drafted pretty good. You got Nino Niederreiter, John Tavares, and Kyle Okposo. Second line, you got Brock Nelson, Franz Nielsen, Sean Bergenheim. Anders Lee, third line with Josh Bailey and Blake Como. Fourth line, David Alstrom, Casey Zizekas, and Matt Martin. So their lineup actually looks like an NHL lineup. And then defensively, Jared Spurgeon was drafted by the Islanders as a 6th round pick in 2008. If you guys also didn't realize that. He never played a game with the Islanders, though. Him with Travis Hamonic, and then you got Andrew McDonald, Calvin DeHaan, Matt Donovan, and Aaron Ness. Goaltending-wise, they didn't draft really any good goaltenders after they thought Rick DiPietro was going to be their number one. But they drafted Anders Nilsson and Kevin Poulin. Scratched, you got Mark Kadek, Yuri Niemi, Rhett Rekashani, Robert Nilsson, Kurs Campoli, Blake Kessel, which is Phil Kessel's brother, Bruno Gervais, Yaroslav Mrazek, Jan Holub, and Robin Figren. One thing I actually realized with the Islanders is they draft a lot of Nilsons/Nelsons, because as you can see, Robert Nilsson's there. Then you had Anders Nilsson in net. And then in forward core, you had Brock Nelson and Franz Nielsen. So that's 4 different like Nielsen/Nelson/ whatever it was. So anyways, kind of interesting with that. So anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this part 2 of my 2000 to 2010 NHL draft rosters. So in the next episode, we'll do the Rangers to the Winnipeg Jets/Atlanta Thrashers, and then after that we'll do a season simulation and see who is the best draft prospect team from 2000 to 2010. So thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.